This conference will now be recorded.
And welcome everyone to the Evergreen Cataloging Interest Group. This is their August meeting. I am Jennifer Weston, the facilitator of this fine group. And on behalf of the organizing committee, whose names you see listed at the top of the agenda here, we welcome you. If you are new to this call, welcome. What you are seeing here is the agenda, and the agenda will magically turn into the notes because we will take notes as we go today. This will be posted up to our wiki, and you have the link to the wiki here. Tiny little link there. It's further down on the agenda too. Those will be posted up within 24 to 48 hours. The recording will be posted, and I will post the notes up this afternoon, so they'll all be available to share with others. Today's agenda is just had a last minute adjustment. So today we were expecting to have Jessica Wolford from Bibliomation to talk about the reports interest group, and she's having some system issues she needs to take care of there at Bibliomation, so she will be joining us next month. I do have some information I can share from the reports interest group though. And Mike Rylander is here with us to answer all, or most all, of our questions about authorities. We're picking up our discussion from Authority Fest that we had right after the conference in June, and that we're anxious to get back to because it was a really great conversation, and we're glad Mike's joining us today. I do have just our kind of standard agenda items here, and I will point out that if you have the link to this agenda and you're following along, this should be open to anybody that wants to edit. So I'll be taking notes, and others on the organizing committee may be adding notes. So if there's anything that that you want to add to the bottom of the agenda, here I'll just scroll to the bottom, try to scroll slowly. There's just this note for general discussion. So if there's anything that you want to drop in there, you can either put a note in chat or just make a note there on the discussion list too. I take away editing privileges after the call, but for today, I want everyone to have access to that. So that said, let's get started with our full agenda. I've done the welcome and announcements. I've been saying for a couple of months now that we were working on the wiki, and I'm continuing to do that, and I'm continuing to ask for volunteers. Primarily because once we start talking about authorities, I want to have on our wiki a page that is dedicated to authorities. So the stuff that we're talking about today is not, I'm going to say not necessarily, it is definitely not included on our wiki. So we've got links to some really good authorities resources we want to make sure that we share. So if anybody is interested in working with me on the wiki, please let me know. I have not scheduled or have not sent out a scheduled time to kind of just have a working session. I do intend to send that out by the end of this month. So if you're somebody who has volunteered in the past, look for a message from me soon. And if you don't hear from me, feel free to nudge me. And if anybody that's interested at all, please let me know, because it takes a village to keep that up to date, that's for sure. Let's moving right along. Standard things we look at are updates to Evergreen release notes and resources there. You have links to all the different versions of Evergreen. So you have 3.9, 3.8, 3.73. All of these are there. These are the most recent, and all of the documentation is up to date. All the links for the for the release notes and the tabular release notes are up to date. And of course, there's a page on our wiki that talks about the latest releases. So if you're at a point in time and you're wondering what the latest release is, if you're thinking about upgrading, this is a quick and easy way to find out, and we keep that updated, as well as just linking out to release notes. And of course, you can always find out on the Evergreen website to their link for downloadables. But this way, you just have an extra place to go that's right there on the cataloging interest group page. As always, there's a link to the official documentation. We talk about the official documentation a lot, so we like to put a link there. There's also a community demo server, and I can't repeat this enough to say this is really nice as we are talking about the functionality of some of these later releases. If your library is not yet on either 3.8 or 3.9, but you want to see the functionality, the community demo server is an excellent way to do that. So when you click on that link, you'll have information there on how to log in. The password, username and password are there, and there is a server there now for a demo there for 3.9. And we're not talking specifically about anything 3.9 today, but we do often do that, and recognizing that it would be nice for you to have a place to be able to test this out. And there it is. And just as I'm making announcements here, next month's program is going to be a return to a conference roundtable that my colleague Rogan Hamby and I led during the Evergreen conference that's kind of imagining the future of collection development, which is a little bit of a misnomer. It's not just collection development. We're starting to think about how can you describe your collection development in a way that is a very cataloger forward kind of perspective. So then we started trending into a conversation about what might a cataloging dashboard look like. So there are links there to slides and our notes from that kind of brainstorming session that we had, and we want to pick that up so that we can make that more actionable and turn it into wish list items. The slides are rather minimal, but the notes are very, very clear.
I can't wait for that myself. That was such a good conversation, and a dashboard sounds amazing.
Yeah, it really does. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate the enthusiasm. What we really want to do is, and I have not yet, is kind of get our notes organized. So now you've just got the raw notes. So absolutely encourage you. This is our regular September program. So that's going to be the second Tuesday, which will be the 13th of September. I'm checking the chat. Mary asked, does it include the fixes from bug squashing week? I do not think so. And I think you're replying to the community demo. I don't think the community, the fixes from bug squashing week, I don't think have been released yet. I think they've been committed, but I don't think there's been a new release. So no, the demo server does not include the fixes, and I don't believe the demo server was included in bug squashing week testing. But I will double check that and confirm, let you know. Very good question. Thanks, Mary. Okay, Andrea says correct. Demo is only 3.9.0. Yeah, so it hasn't been updated. And 3.9.1 is still pending release. So as soon as that's available, I'll update our tabular release notes, and I'll update the wiki and send out a note as well. So, and Mary gave us the perfect segue to celebrations. Bug squashing week was very successful, and the timing was lovely. After we finished our call last month, and we said, well, we didn't know when it was going to be, I swear Taryn sent a message out that afternoon announcing bug squashing week. So bug squashing week has happened between our two calls this time. So thanks to everybody who participated in bug squashing week. There's a summary page there that Taryn puts together, and a huge thanks over and over to all that Taryn does for wrangling that, and then to everyone who did participate. If you want to kind of get an update on the types of things that were tested, signed off on, and the kinds of participation that was involved last week, I don't know. When was the date? It was July 25th through the 29th, the dates for bug squashing week. You can see the patches that have been tested and signed off, and as we just talked, there's not been a new release with those yet. It did include a lot of testing for Angular circulation and patron interfaces, and as much testing as we've all done for the Angular staff catalog, you can imagine how much more is involved in the circulation and patron interfaces. It touches practically everything. So you might want to watch that and kind of see some of those bugs the Launchpad bugs were getting really, really, really long. So Taryn pulled that out into a testing checklist, which I encourage you to kind of review to see the types of things that are being reviewed before that's released to the general public. So thanks again to everybody that's participated there. As always, just because bug squashing week is over doesn't mean you do not have a way to participate. There's always ways to get involved.
My brain's already melting.
No melting of brains
All right,
this afternoon.
Have a good lunch.
Okay, I am going to mute that. Okay, let's see here. Catalogers Connect. This is the point where we just talk about what's going on with the other interest groups. And as always, I've just got the regular meeting schedule here and the most up-to-date information that I am aware of when the next meetings are. I kind of pull that from our various listservs. And if you want to follow any of these groups and you're not already, I've got a link there to the group mailing list so you can sign up. And each of these links that you'll see here, starting with AC, is a link to their individual wiki pages. So each interest group does a great job keeping up with their own documentation on those pages. And you have contact information on each of those as well. As is usually the case, I've got a little note on here if there are date changes. So new devs usually meets on the third Wednesdays, and as you'll see, the 16th is August 16th is indeed not a Wednesday, it's a Tuesday. So if I find those, I try to make sure we incorporate those onto the list here. And I've got one announcement from the outreach committee. Did any of the other interest groups or anybody participating in any of the other interest groups have anything that they want to announce today? While I take a sip of water. Okay. Hearing none, the outreach committee met recently. And one of the things that is missing on the outreach committee is, of course, volunteers. Every committee, every interest group needs more volunteers. This one is looking specifically for people to contribute to social media. So people to participate in sending out notices on the Evergreen Facebook page and Evergreen Twitter accounts. So if this is something you're interested in, please notify the outreach committee at that email address there. And Launchpad bugs, I was just going to skip over today. I didn't have a specific Launchpad bug I wanted to highlight, just so we have as much time as possible to talk about authorities today. But this is a standing agenda item, so as always, there's a link here to that comprehensive list of tags. These are all the various different tags that you might want to search. There is a link to the wiki. That wiki is the cataloging interest group wiki. And then I usually just pull out these 3 categories. These are tags that search all of Launchpad, not just cataloging specific ones for new. So anything that's new could be any kind of new bug, not necessarily for us or for cataloging interest, but there is, of course, the cataloging bugs and staff catalog. So this, as I usually say, as we're come together, this is a good time for us to, while we are together, if you want to highlight any of these, please do. Again, just because I didn't have a specific one to talk about, if there's anything you would like to bring to the group, please feel free to do that. Or as always, and I've said that phrase a few times today, if you want to highlight a particular bug, just send it to the list, and we're glad to do that. And so many of you do that pretty frequently to add heat or to get discussion about particular bugs. And we can either talk about those during our calls like we did last week with last month with a particular bug, or we can just continue conversations on the listserv. Okay, that's my longer than usual introduction through the kind of standing agenda items. As I mentioned, Jessica was supposed to join us to talk about the sample reports page on the reports interest group and the kind of the activities that they're doing to start gathering that information, sample reports meaning just that. So I left that link here to the wiki, and I think maybe we could just look at it together for a moment. She will come and talk to us more about the more recent activities that are going on here, but you can see that this is a good resource I wanted to share before Jessica can join us and start talking about the kinds of input she's looking for. But if you see any of these that have links on them, the item reports, these are all just shared report templates that are there. So let's just click on it together and see what this might look like. So just like, for example, here's a list of items that have been deleted. Looks like the templates are giving you display fields, and I would have to make this much bigger for you to be able to see that on the screen. Make it a little bit bigger there, but you can follow along with the links there. So what these are doing is providing the display fields and the filters so that you could recreate this for yourself if you wanted. So it's going to be a really great resource for us, great repository of item templates, well, of report templates rather, for the clearly for the traditional reporter. I know that we're all excited about simple reports coming out, but this is most certainly for the existing reporter in Evergreen. So I'll just leave that there, and then we'll invite Jessica to be with us next month to talk a little more about what's going on there. And I would imagine that if you have questions, she will entertain those if you want to email her. And I will add her email address to the notes so that you'll be able to do that. And there is, of course, the reports interest group wiki page. Let's see, when are they meeting? They are meeting at the end of the month. So if you wanted to join their call to learn more about this as well, to get involved, they'll meet on August 31st at 2 p.m. And they are now meeting monthly. Okay, so that brings us to authorities, and let me lay the ground work for this. And then Mike's with us just to answer questions. I have a set of questions set aside that I've pulled from the various different conversations we've had during Authority Fest, and then our conversations after that, either as an organizing committee or then within the monthly calls here. I did just put these links out to several different documents that we have presented before. Here are the Authority Fest slides and the notes from the Authority Fest. There's a cheat sheet is really just taking the, let me actually open that up. It takes the existing documentation that is available in the official Evergreen documentation and just breaks it out into, I believe it's a 2-page document. Yes, it's a 2-page document. So it kind of is an abbreviated version of what's there to help you navigate that documentation a little more. And so that if you're looking specifically for system administration of authorities, this kind of gives you a little insight into how all that works together. And then the second page is more about the everyday managing authorities and that kind of thing. So this is really a cheat sheet in the truest sense of the word. It just takes the larger document and just condenses it down into how to use the documentation that's available. You get out of there. Let's see some of the things that are there. Authority record resources. This I just put together from all the suggestions we got during Authority Fest. So I thought it'd be nice to have all these in one place. I should say all this is going to go on the wiki eventually. I just wanted to share it in the form that it's available now. So there's various different places you can go to look for authority records to import them for your purposes. And then of course, just the format of the authority records is there as well. Let's see, anything else I've got to share with you today? Well, there's just a link to the existing bugs for authority records. And that just takes you over to Launchpad to give you that list. So where are we with authorities work before we start asking questions? I am going to once again say we're looking for volunteers for a authorities working group, which is going to be a subset of the cataloging group because we won't talk about authorities every month. In cataloging, we have a list of projects that we want to take on, discussions we want to have for the remainder of this year. But we want to kind of do this offline meaning outside of our monthly calls, but that we can do that email. Several of you have agreed to be part of this. And what is this authorities working group? It's really following these kind of 3 stages here. Our first goal is just kind of review and update the documentation of the current functionality. Let's get our heads around how it works now. So that's the biggest question here. How's it working now? Are we clear about how it works? If not, we'll ask questions. And that's how we led to invite Mike here today, is we have some questions. And then we'll kind of get that documented and with examples so that we can put those on our wiki. And beyond that, we need to test these existing launchpads and see if they're still relevant, if these things are still behavioral issues. And by still, I mean in the most recent versions of Evergreen. So do we still see them in 3.7, 3.8? And then beyond that, we would move into this kind of wish list brainstorming. So there are quite a few wish list bugs already about things we'd like to see happen, but we really would like to take that project and pull it into something that's more comprehensive and bring back to this community, to the cataloging group at some point, and then talk about what that wish list might look like. So it's really that 3-step process, and we are very much here in step 1, this review, update of current functionality, and making sure we understand how it works now. And like I said, I have questions to get started. Our biggest thing, I think, coming out of Authority Fest and looking at all the notes we took is a lot of it is not so much about where we get authority records from. I mean, we provided those resources for a reason, if you had questions about that, but it's more about what happens to them once they're in the database. There were some questions about you can work with a vendor who will scrub your authority records and, alike Backstage and Marchive will do that, but that's not really what our conversations are about. We can send those out, work with them to get your authority records cleaned up, and then some kind of management roles. And if you have questions about that, there are lots of libraries that are doing that, and feel free to put a message into the listserv if anybody has questions about working with that kind of vendor. But we're just talking about Evergreen specifically. So I have a series of questions about linking authorities. Does anybody want to start with their own questions before I just start peppering Mike with the ones that I've put together? And I'm going to put the post to the agenda. Somebody's asked for it. Andrew's asked for it here in the chat box while I did it. Hold on just a moment. Okay. There's the link to the agenda. Okay, then I'm going to start. And as I ask questions, I hope it leads to others. Mike, now you're on the spot. One of our biggest questions coming out of authorities was about that validation button. And when we hit validate, and at various stages when we hit validate. So let's talk first about what happens with validate when it's a brand new record. I've just brought it over, and I want to see if my authority records look good. Is hitting the validate button going to do that for me?
Well, I've actually got the validate code up right now, so we can kind of step through what it does.
Okay.
And that may not answer your direct question, your first direct question, but hopefully it'll start to get some coverage on what we should expect and shouldn't expect from it. So the validate button has existed since before the direct authority linking and the authority propagation, which we'll talk about later, existed. So what it does is it sends a subset of the information from the bib record to the server. Basically, it's just taking out the specific bib data field, so the tag, the indicators, the subfield codes and values in the order that they're presented in the record, and sending that to the server. And the server then, it actually constructs an ephemeral authority record using the indicator and subfield code and value data, but the tag is the tag that's mapped from the bib side to the authority side. So a 650 would a 650 with just the Library of Congress control set configured, which is the stock Evergreen configuration. It would create an ephemeral 150 authority record that contains all of the data that the bib has on its side. Now, it only uses the subfield code and value pairs for those that it knows should be controlled on the authority side, but there's more than one configuration for the authority 150. You can have just the pre-subdivision subfields, and then you can have just the subdivision subfields, or you can have a pre-composed authority record that has both the main entry and the subdivision fields. So it constructs that ephemeral authority record, and then it hands it to the system and says, whatever you would normally do with an authority record, please create me a heading entry that I could use to match against existing authorities. And then it goes looking for existing headings that exactly match the control set. That's the collection of thesauri that belong to the Library of Congress are the default ones. But if you have multiple control sets configured, it's going to go through all of them looking for the right one, or looking for a match rather, and it looks for a matching heading that exists on the authority side that is an exact match for the authority tag, bib, indicators, subfield and subfield code and value pairs strung together into a heading string, an internal, what Evergreen constructs to map to record its internal heading strings. And if it finds one, then your field is validated. It returns a 1. It returns true to the caller. If it does not find a heading that matches any of the configured sets of subfield code and value pair strings that could come from that bib field or could be controlled in that bib field, then it says the field is not validated. And I can't remember now the way it's expressed visually, because the MARC editor's gone through so many revisions, but
Pretty sure it's just a red X.
Yeah,
it green checks and red X.
Right. So it visually indicates that the heading that is in this field could be controlled, but it is not. It does not. The values that you have in the bib do not match any of the headings that you have on the authority side. Does not mean that it's already linked. It doesn't mean it doesn't confirm that the values you have on the bib side are the same as the values for the linked authority record that's in the subfield 0. That those still match. Doesn't do any of that. All it's doing is saying, does this bib data when passed through the authority heading extraction algorithm, match an extant authority heading in the system.
I think I caught all of that, Mike, while you were talking.
Yeah, your notes look like a good summation to me. But then I'm I'm the one that was speaking, so I don't want to speak too much. But yeah, that's I think you got it.
Okay, fantastic. So is there a situation, and I say is there because this is one of the scenarios we were talking about them. Gosh, we've had so many conversations about authorities recently, but sometime we've talked about the scenario where when you first bring over a record and you hit the validate button. So I haven't saved it yet. I just bring it in and I'm looking at everything. I've made my edits and I'm getting ready to save it. But I think before I do, I'm going to hit validate it and everything goes green, even though we know it's wrong. Is that what would cause that?
Well, I'm not sure. There's always the opportunity for bugs, but we're not passing a record ID to say, go get the record and do this.
Mm-hmm.
So the pre and post saving shouldn't matter. And when you say wrong, you mean you have data in a field that should be controllable by the authority system in Evergreen, but the data in the data in the field itself, does not have a matching authority heading. Is that what you mean by
yes?
wrong?
To oversimplify, let's just say that it's a brand new author that we know we do not have an authority record for.
Okay. I don't have a specific reason for that. But if what you're saying is you've seen this occur only specifically with new records, as opposed to existing records, then there's nothing conceptually that should make that different. But there are certainly things within the MARC editor that may be reacting differently based on whether or not this record was pulled out of the database or injected as a blob of MARC from the side, basically, because it's a new record.
Well, that's good to know then. I mean, as far as because one of our questions trying to get around all this is knowing what to expect. So this should not matter, is what I'm hearing, that unless there's a bug of some sort. But really, the expected behavior should be that if we're bringing over something that just doesn't exist at all, that it should not validate.
Well, let me reread the code just to make sure. So for each bib field, we're going to look for the control. We're going to the client the staff client can say this is controlled by a specific control set, but let's not worry about control sets right now. Let's just assume that the Library of Congress control set, which is basically that's the collection of bib and authority fields that map to each other, and the thesaurus definitions that we use to find which fields should be used and that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
But most everyone's just using the stock control set information. So for each bib field, we're going to look for the controlling authority tag, and then we're going to get the list of subfields that this authority mapping should cover. Then we're going to pull those values out of the bib record, or the bib data rather, and construct an ephemeral authority record. And we're going to ask for the simple heading from that from that ephemeral authority record. And let's see here. If we find a heading that matches, then we will tell the staff client that we found one, and here's the authority record that we found. And then on the staff client side, it should be saying, oh, this passed, I get a 1. So I can imagine several staff client side bugs that could be involved here, or could exist here. I don't have any proof that any one of them do or don't, but
Sure.
So for right now, we'll say that the implementation is intended to do exactly what you said. If you don't have an authority record for a bib field that should be controllable by an authority entry, then it should say no. You're not. This field is not validated.
Okay. That's very, very good to know. So then our charge is, if we see that that's not working, just kind of document what we're seeing.
Yes, the more details and examples you can provide, the better. Especially if it's circumstantial, brand new incoming record pre-save versus a record that's already in the system, or if it's data related. So if you can get a record to fail and then export the record and import it into another system and have it fail there as well, when you know it should succeed, or vice versa, then that would be extremely helpful in tracking down any bugs.
Okay, so I just left an action note then for us as catalogers when we see that. I led with that because that was one of those things that during Authority Fest, I think lots of different people were trying to validate at the same time, and nobody could get a red mark to save their lives. So we just kept trying to make it fail, and we couldn't make it. Well, fail is not the right word. We couldn't make it not validate. So that's the reason I led with that. But yeah, and it sounds like if the expected behavior is that if it is not matching, that it should not validate, then we just need to go back to those examples we were looking at and document those and as a group, and then eventually put them in Launchpad once we're able to confirm what we're seeing. Okay.
Cool.
Anybody else have questions about validation before I just continue to monopolize Mike's time?
Hi, this is Mackenzie at EPI. I have a question.
Hi, Mackenzie.
Yeah, sort of following that, I just want to clarify validation. When it is matching against the authority record, it is only matching against like the main entry in the authorities 1xx field, right? Like any use for, like I think that's the, if I recall correctly, like anything in a 4xx field in an authority record, like any of the, don't use these, use the main heading instead. It's not trying to match up against any of those, correct? It's only matching against the main one?
Well, no, it looks like it will attempt to match against any of them, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It does not. Yeah. So we take the bib field, we take the tag from the bib side, and then we say what could control these. And right now what the code is doing is it's saying, give me all of the fields that could do that could control this. So it would be looking at 4XX and 5XX as well.
Follow up then, is there anything beyond that, particularly if it's matching against a 4XX, that's like, oh, if it's matching against a 4XX, you should be using the heading in the 1XX?
So that's a slightly different part of the bib editor embedded authority functionality, and you would use the linking function for that. So the validate button really just goes through and says, is there a heading, an authority heading that matches the data in this bib record, in all the controllable fields in this bib record. The linking functionality though does do what you're suggesting. So it does a heading search, but then it goes a step further and drops you into the heading list in such a way that the 4XXs, you're going to be centered on the 4XX, but you're going to be kind of indented into the main entry. So you're going to be, it's going to center the list on the 4XX match, but you're going to have immediate access to the main entry, to the 1XX, so that when you click the link this authority record, it will replace the data on the bib side that was matching the 4XX with the main entry heading. So the validate doesn't do that part. The linking does that part.
Thank you.
Sure. Which is not to say it's the best of all possible implementations. Extending the validation to do, to only look at main entries would be beneficial. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to give a visual of what Mackenzie was talking about here. So we look at, for example, if we're trying to match against T-Trade, here are these others, the see from and see also, that would be further down. When you talk about indenting, when you're dropping into this list, that I just given a visual of what that would look, what that
right.
means.
So
authorities.
if you had T industry in the bib, you would see approximately the same listing of headings, but you would know as a cataloger to click apply on T trade instead of T industry.
Right. That was just for the visuals there. Okay. Mackenzie, did that answer your questions?
So far, yes.
You have more questions, Mackenzie?
Not at the moment, but it's all authority talk. So I'm hoping for something else will percolate in my brain.
Absolutely, me too. Anybody else questions? While I'm getting my screens back to work here. I'm going to move on to linking unless anybody else has a question. Some of these I think have been asking for, and we have about 20 minutes left. So I'm trying to prioritize here. Linking, can we just start at the kind of the basics, Mike? As far as linking, when does this happen? Can you talk about what the cron job is and what it actually does overnight? You know, high level. We don't have to get into too much, but just to give us a starting place.
So the most common way of using it is to have it look for records that have been edited, and that includes addition. The edit date, the most recent edit date on the record is since the last time it was run. And what that job does is basically automates an approximation of what you're doing when you click the link button on in the MARC editor. It goes through and it pulls out the bib fields, looks for a matching authority heading, and if it finds a main entry heading, it adds the subfield 0 to the record, which then when the bib record is saved, the subfield 0 the subfield 0 data is pulled out for all the subfield zeros across the entire record, and each of the authority records that those point to are then linked to the bib outside of the mark, so that the system knows that there's a direct relationship between this authority record and the list of bibs that are pointing to it in their subfield zeros. So that's high level what the nightly job, the cron job, does. Is it just inserts the subfield zeros for exact matches on authority controllable headings on the bib side. It will skip fields. I believe that this is configurable, but generally speaking, it will skip fields that are already linked with the subfield 0, so it's not redoing work. It works on records that it is told to work on, so it doesn't go through and do all records every time it's run. You generally giving it a time range or a list of bib IDs that you want to do the work on.
And when you say time range, you mean time range based on, okay, we wanted to see if there have been any edits, new records or edits to records in the last 24 hours or since the last time it was run.
Right, yes, exactly.
Okay, here's one that I know you and I have talked about, but I thought it would be good to talk about with the group. And this is what happens if you've done all this linking and then, we discovered there's been a misspelling on the authority record. We make the change to the authority record. I believe at this, well, I'm not going to answer for you. Our question is that if we make a change to the authority record and it's already been linked to the bib record, is it propagated through to where it changes the bib?
So you can turn that on, but it takes too long for that job to run when you have lots of bibs that use that authority record, which will be the case in most systems that are not of trivial size. So if you only ever want to use the Concerto data set for your whole consortium, your statewide consortium, then it'll work great. But you'll only have 250 bibs to work with. Now, this is directly addressed, and it's actually the original driving use case for the queued ingest functionality. That is a feature that was developed this past winter and spring. It's in testing now. Hopefully it will get into 3.10. I've got my fingers crossed. We'll see. But what queued ingest does is it removes all of the expensive, in terms of time, all of the time-consuming pieces of the ingest process and moves it outside of the mechanism that just simply updates the core MARC bibliographic data and authority data. So when you have an authority record change today, by default, everything is turned off. The authority propagation is turned off because it takes too long. It takes as long as, essentially, as long as it takes to save each bib record in series. So if you have thousands of bib records that use a particular heading, it will take thousands of seconds, give or take, for that to finish, and that just times out. That times out the saving of the authority record. It happens during the authority record's save process in the database. Now, what queued ingest does is it says, we need you to go and check on these bibs, and then it immediately returns. And then another process comes along right after you, as the cataloger, to regain control of the interface, and it goes through in its own time and in a more efficient way that we can do out of band. it goes through and it updates all the bib records with the changes that were made because of the authority update. So it breaks that process into two pieces where we save what we need to happen to the bibs off to the side and very quickly return control to the user. And then over the next however long it takes, the bib records get updated in the background.
I think I got it. This is exciting news. It really
Yes.
is, because I can't wait for this. My next question is going to be, it's in testing, and we're hoping this will be in 3.10. Is that
I
possible?
hope so.
Okay.
I do hope so. Yes.
There
Marvelous.
is I think a branch on the pull requested bug if other people want to test it.
Yeah, please don't
dropped
let it's in testing stop anybody from giving it a try.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're testing it with our dev partners, but that does not at all preclude any of y'all from testing on your own as well, particularly large data sites. We're most interested in that.
Absolutely. And I noticed that Janet put in there that I think that there's been a bug for a long time that talked about timing out of records. And she said essentially more than 150 linked bibs is what was documented back for at 3.5. So yeah, so something as simple as 150 linked bibs was causing a problem back in the day. So this will be a huge improvement. So that's it. Just to take that, this isn't really about how it's moving beyond how it works now into what can we do about that. So now it's really just a matter of whatever process you have available to you to update in batch records, whether that mark edit tends to be the most common there, is if you needed to make changes to a large number of authority records and didn't want to do them one by one, that would be kind of the way to go. And we might want to look at how we can support people that are learning to do that as well. Okay. So yeah, we got not just linking, we got what happens if you make changes to authority records. Is there anything else we know of now that, let me think about linking, that I want to pop in here? I guess kind of lastly, and again, Mike, this is something you and I have talked about, that if you add an authority record after the fact, for whatever reason, so that if so not only is it not making a change to a current authority record, but if I discover, a month from now, gosh, I've been adding books for an author that I don't have an authority record from, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw that authority record in there. Will it actually update those bib records retrospectively? So they're existing, authority record wasn't there, but now it is.
No, it will not right now, but because we have most of the infrastructure that we would need to do that, it's within the realm of a mid-sized development project to make that happen, to make that reasonable as a batch process. It still wouldn't be, you save the authority record and the system goes and immediately controls all of the bibs with that authority that it could possibly control. But that can now be reasonably a mid-sized development job that would be for a batch process on the server side.
Yes. So when we're thinking about wish list type things, that would not be out of the scope of reasonability.
Yes, we now have most of the infrastructure, and with Qt ingest, we can even make it not only fast, but fast from the system administrator's point of view, but also observable, so we can watch for any problems in the process as well.
Okay, lovely. Like trying to give us perspective for things that when we start talking about wish list items and reviewing some that are there already, that being very reasonable about it. Okay, I think that hits the highlights that I wanted to hit today. And again, I've gone through all of our notes. If anybody's reviewing the, I'm scrolling all the way back up here, the Authority Fest notes there. There's a lot on there, a lot of really good conversation. clearly not something that we can cover over. I mean, this was a 2-hour meeting that we had brainstorming. We've talked about revisiting that as well. So if you're interested in doing that, and you want to be part of continuing this conversation, to where we can just continue this clarification of how things work and make sure it's really good and documented, and then start working through those bugs that are there, and then our wish list of some future functionality kinds of things. Please let me know, because we had such a great brainstorming session, and I don't want us to lose this conversation that we had. Anyway, so I did try to bring out as much of this as possible. Some of these how do you link and validate kinds of notes that were there, some of the top level questions, recognizing that we'll have lots more that are very scenario related, and our task at this point is to start documenting those specifics so that when we ask questions, we can, well, be specific about it, right? Let's see, I don't see any more questions. We do know how, if we have questions, a couple of things going on, send them to the listserv. And well, that was probably the best way to do that until I get the wiki up and running to share information there, or the authority page of the wiki. Listserv for catalogers is probably the best way to go. Mike, anything I didn't ask you that I feel like I should have about authorities?
I feel like you're just asking me to open myself up to all kinds of new stuff. No, well, my hope is to understand what the priorities for catalogers are with regard to authorities, where we should start putting the brain time for thinking about future enhancements or removal of things that are happening now. There are a couple outstanding authority-related things that I need to get up on Launchpad myself. One is to make it easier to deal with record or authority records that are entirely separated, not pre-composed. So it's easier to do main entry heading or and pre-composed, or rather, sorry, main entry heading and subdivisions together in one field on the bib side, but separated on the authority side, and the others to do paired tag matching, 240 and 100 versus the 150, or the 100 on the authority side. So
along those lines, somewhere that I feel like could be a good starting point is the free-floating subdivisions that, there's a set list. They pretty much have been the same forever and ever. And those are the ones that can cause, because they're not pre-composed, like you said, they can be tacked onto anything. But they will, say invalid because it wasn't composed that way necessarily. It doesn't, we're not going to put a separate authority record in there for, just tacking fiction subdivision on the end of it,
Right. Yes, and in particular things like geographic subdivisions are what that's where I've looked for examples. But if anybody out there has specific examples they can show where this is what we want it to, this is how we want it to act, with ideally with a couple of authority records to show the controlling side construction that you want.
Sure.
So that we can recreate those scenarios. That would be ideal. The difficulty comes from being able to do a fully pre-composed one, right?
Right.
You have those fields in there, and you only have A and B in the main entry authority alone. Then it's never going to validate when the bib side has the the other fields at the end, the subdivisions at the end. So yes, we know that we do know that's an issue, and we want to look into that. So if that's a high priority one, let us know. Or
thanks. Yep.
collect the scenarios for that. That will get us a lot of the way towards being able to move in the right direction.
Yep. And it sounds like that's very much our next step, is to start looking at this specific kind of thing, is putting together the scenarios, just what you asked for, to send specific examples so that we can talk about what the desired behavior would be. And our priority, I know that this is one that a lot of best practices are being written around. We're not going to take our time in putting in a different tag for each one of these free floating subdivisions. That it's just not worth time. But if, juvenile fiction, that kind of thing, that if we could at least make sure that that's recognized. Anyway, going too far down that path, we'll say that the way to do this is to come together as an authorities working group. We can tackle much of it through the listserv, but being able to just have time to share these specific examples. So I will reach out to those of you that have volunteered already, and this is an open call for anybody that might want to continue this conversation to just email me off outside of this meeting. And we'll set up some time to talk about how we can make this work, where we start gathering this information, and then bring it back here in a few months to the community interest group, to the cataloging interest group, to look at some prioritization of it so that we can get it into Launchpad and get the community talking about it. Okay, well, we're almost at time. Mike, thank you so very, very much. This has been hugely helpful, and it's now documented for the record for anybody that wasn't here, and that makes it even more hugely helpful. And anybody have any last minute things before we go that you might want to drop in discussion? Please feel free to do that. I am going to stop the recording because we're at time, but as always, I'll hang out for a little while if anybody has anything they want to talk about outside of the call. Again, Mike, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for pulling me in, Jennifer. I appreciate it. Would it be helpful for me to put in a pointer into the code where the authority validation occurs so that folks can direct their local Perl people to take a look and help clarify?
Absolutely. That would be fabulous.
I'll send you that. I don't know that I can edit maybe I can suggest in the notes.
Okay. Whatever works for you. I'll add them, however you can get it to me. Okay. Yeah, excellent idea. Well, and I know that we bump up against other meetings, so have a wonderful rest of the month of August. We'll see you all in September, and I'll continue to forward information to you as I put it together. So thanks so much. See you later.